The Browns have certainly had their issues with the draft over the last few years. We'll get a little bit deeper into detail on that. But there are three players from the 2023 draft class that the Cleveland Browns desperately need to step up here in 2025. We're going to talk about all that. Browns 3D on the OBR begins now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. And I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. We appreciate everybody who comes on out to the OBR every single day to read the written content from our fantastic group of writers, or joins us every evening here beginning at 6 p.m. Eastern with Browns 3D, hosted by myself, 7 o'clock tonight. And this is the name you're going to hear a little bit about. Third year pass rusher Isiah McGuire. 7 o'clock, you will have Sam Penix, you will have Jacob Roche. And they take a little bit of a deeper dive on the film from Isiah McGuire from the 2024 season. As always, make sure you subscribe to the OBR on YouTube. And of course, make sure you subscribe to the OBR over on Twitch. Hope everybody is holding up well. Heat wave time here in late June of 2025. Absolute scorcher. But the good news, folks, is we are less than 1 month away from rookies and then veterans reporting to Cleveland Browns training camp. Now, Andrew Berry and his draft classes, certainly from 23, 24, 22, 23, 24, certainly there's a lot of debate about it and maybe the success of it. Some people want to give him a hard time from the lack of top performers from those 3 years. I kind of wonder how you're supposed to get those top performers when essentially you do not have those top picks. When we were talking about the 22, 23, and 24 drafts, the Cleveland Browns had one pick that was in the top 64. That player was taken a year and change ago. That was defensive tackle Mike Hall from Ohio State. So yes, as much as you need the draft certainly to be a foundation to your roster construction, when you give up so much capital as the Browns did, and look, we can all sit here and revamp that thing to death now. But if number 4, the quarterback whose name does not need to be said, had turned to be a successful player for this franchise, I don't think anybody would be, trying to vilify the 22, 23, and 24 drafts the way they currently are now. If he had just simply got it done, Browns would have had their franchise quarterback, and all of these conversations would be null and void. But there are 3 guys, however, from the 2023 draft who the Browns really need to succeed here in 2025 in their third years. And it's first and foremost, and we'll start with Cedric Tillman. And I guess Andrew Berry was asked about the wide receiver class and the wide receiver room, and didn't necessarily, give an answer, basically stating that the Browns were still looking for help. The Browns are always looking for help. The Browns are always tinkering. And it was probably in Berry's best interest to not give a direct answer to this question, because the last thing you want to do is, tell teams that, hey, you're interested in acquiring a wide receiver, therefore basically showing your hold card and then driving up any potential asking price if anyone is looking to move a wide receiver. We've certainly done episodes where we've spoken about teams who might be in the plus department in the wide receiver room. The Packers, perhaps the Chargers, the Patriots, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, all teams that may have enough talented rosters currently on their 90 but maybe too many talented wide receivers to make it to a 53-man roster. And with teams like the Cleveland Browns, who will hold the number 2 overall waiver position, it obviously makes great sense if any of these teams are going to try to risk putting these guys through waivers, that the Browns are going to pounce. So therefore, for the Browns, there is a good opportunity to negotiate with any of these teams. And you can basically, tell them, well, if you release so and so, you will not be getting him back. So your choice is you're not going to keep him. I am going to take him from you. Or is there a chance anything, a future, pick, a, concreted day 3 pick, or just, something where, hey, if he meets, certain protocols, his play will dictate what the pick you acquire is. It's not something that's usually not going to happen on a deal that is done, around cut down weekend. So if there's teams looking to cut wide receivers, the Cleveland Browns are going to be there most likely to vacuum them up. But one of the guys that certainly can maybe change the urgency of bringing in another wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns is now third-year wide receiver Cedric Tillman. And there were flashes, certainly brief as a rookie in 2023. If you guys remember the Denver Bronco game, he and Cedric Tillman obviously were high school teammates. They had a nice thing going that day in Denver before both eventually left the game early. And this has always kind of been, one of the, I don't want to say Achilles heel because right now that's a damaging word, a damaging phrase, right? But these have been one of the things that kind of nipped Cedric Tillman in the butt here over the last few seasons. Injured his final season at Tennessee, dinged up a little bit in 2023, and unfortunately, we know the deal in 2024. Thursday night against the Steelers, makes a catch, takes a hit, and just was not seen again for the entire season. But Cedric Tillman was really showing you things as an X receiver. And anybody who's not sure what that actually means is the X receiver is the one that is lined up on the line of scrimmage. I do get some questions about that time from time, so I'm trying to make a better effort to, answer these things and have them put out there for you. So your X receiver, normally a bit of a bigger, thicker, stronger wide receiver. So for Tillman, and it came down, certainly. It was, the Raven game, and there were, 2 other, and it was a 3-game stretch where Cedric Tillman was really putting it all together last year. So for him, leaving when he did certainly left the Browns staff and front office in a little bit of a conundrum spot. Here was a player that they had just seen the best of his NFL abilities over a 3-week stretch. Now, as you're looking as your team at the present, you're looking at your team at the future. Certainly the Browns are looking at a guy like Cedric Tillman at the time and going, well, all right, here we are, year 2. Maybe it's really starting to come together. Maybe he can possibly be a full-time starter in this league, which isn't insane to think about for a player that was drafted in the 3rd round. It's not that crazy to assume that a player that was drafted in the 3rd round eventually develops into a starter. Yes, the wide receiver position is certainly different than other position, guard, tackle, et cetera, where you play 4, 5, 6, and they all have a role. So for Tillman, and it certainly didn't help that, he had missed some of the spring and really just got into it towards the end. But this is a player the Browns need to hopefully be day 1 ready at training camp, because Cedric Tillman certainly can ease the concern and the need for bringing another wide receiver in, because you can just say, hey, we're going to bring somebody in because, maybe we're concerned about our depth. It's a whole lot different when you're saying, I think we have concern and we need somebody to come in here and, be able to give us 40, possibly 50 receptions in 2025. If you look at that stretch last season for Cedric Tillman, it was 7 receptions, 95 receiving yards, 3 and a touchdown. That was his average over a 3-week period, which there you go. That is exactly what you were looking for. That is exactly what you were hoping for. And it wasn't like there was an inflated game necessarily in that 3-game stretch. All 3 games, Cedric Tillman gave you a solid performance. And, Cedric's game is certainly, post patterns, crossers, slants. He's a bigger, stronger guy. He's not the easiest guy in the world for defensive backs to wrestle down. I mean, if Cedric Tillman probably put on 15 to 20 pounds, you could probably use him in some tight end type stuff. But the thought process is with Cedric Tillman is that if he can show you what was that brief, highly productive stretch last year, all of a sudden, this Browns offense, this Browns wide receiver room, hopefully the success of the quarterback, all of a sudden doesn't look as grave, doesn't look as dire, because the Browns could have possibly found a way to trot out a legitimate number 2 wide receiver. So for Tillman, he's going to go into camp, and there will be an absolute, target on him from everyone in attendance, every media member, certainly the entire Cleveland staff and front office, as they are hoping what used to be a big phrase and a big thought process in the NFL of third-year breakout wide receiver. Cedric Tillman certainly falls under that umbrella, and the Cleveland Browns would absolutely like to see Cedric Tillman take that next step. Now, the next guy we're going to speak about was part of the 2 fourth-round selections in the 2023 NFL Draft. We're actually going to get to both of them. But here, and make sure you stick around later at 7 o'clock for Sam and Jacob as they go through some of the film of now third-year defensive end Isiah McGuire. Formerly, of course, out of Missouri. Got to see playing time in 2023 as a rookie when this team just, had some guys that were kind of dinged up, trying to get some guys on the field. And that big magical Thursday night game against the New York Jets that clinched the Cleveland Browns their playoff spot. Rookie Isiah McGuire had a sack in that game. One of the things that you saw from McGuire in 2023 and certainly became extremely evident last season in 2024 was Isiah McGuire's ability to be a difference maker in run defense. I believe his overall grade was over 85. I believe he finished as the 5th ranked defensive end in run defensive grade from PFF last year in 2024. Now that is great work. It's solid work. And as certainly that can be a vital piece here for McGuire as he goes into year 3. But it's also going to maybe put a little bit more spectacle on Isiah McGuire. Because if he can find a way to take the next step as a pass rusher, all of a sudden now, you've got a player who was a day 3 selection that you certainly showed some patience with. And then all of a sudden, you're starting to get a decent return, some dividends from a guy that you would have been more than okay with just being a rotational piece. McGuire will be the starter on defense opposite Myles Garrett. And his run defense is what's going to get him out there, certainly for 1st and 10s, second and short. But how many overall snaps and can he hold some of the guys behind him at bay? That's going to be what probably ultimately defines Isiah McGuire's 2025 season and certainly define just how long of a career he has in Cleveland and the possibility that, he is eventually offered an extension here. Guys that can get it done against the run, they're certainly valued in the NFL. They are not monetarily valued in the NFL. Teams pay for sacks. It's just that simple. We all know that, right? So that's why for McGuire, if he can start to take this turn, continue to be the run defender that he is, and then B, start to turn a corner where, I mean, 7 sacks, 8 sacks. Now all of a sudden you got a guy who's, all of a sudden giving you production at a pretty high level in both aspects. And that certainly would be huge and would be an absolute, boom for the Cleveland Browns, for their defense, as they try to get this defense more on track to 2023 and away from what were the issues of 2024. And people are going to tell you the issues in 2024 were all because of the offense and they turned it over too much. They didn't squid it. All those things are true. But the fact of the matter is that the Cleveland Browns defense did not perform in 2024 the way they performed in 2023. Don't kid yourself. Don't joke yourself. It's just an absolute fact and it's an absolute truth. So certainly the opportunity here for Maguire to, take on a bigger piece of the pie, assume a larger role, and just overall become an impact guy here. If you think about this Browns defense currently, you're not going to have JOK. So impact players, maybe right now for the Cleveland Browns on the defensive side of the ball, and there's a lot of youth, so it's understandable not to have those guys in, you know, jobs of expectation. But I think if you're talking about the stalwarts of the Cleveland Browns defense right now, the only two you're going to bring up are certainly going to be Myles Garrett and, of course, Denzel Ward. I'd say Grant Delpit is there, but teams can find a way to scheme away from a safety. When Denzel Ward is guarding your top wide receiver, you're going to throw to him because he's your top wide receiver. That doesn't take Denzel Ward necessarily out of the game. Myles Garrett, I mean, you can put everybody and your brother and your brother's mother and your brother's mother's cousin on him, and Myles Garrett is still going to have an insane amount of impact on any NFL game. And, the defensive tackle room certainly is promising, young, but it's promising, but they're certainly not there yet. But Maguire, with his consistency that we have seen in drips and drabs as a rookie, and certainly his consistency that we saw in 2024. And that might be one of the most impressive things when you're talking about Isiah McGuire's year last year. And I am not saying this and pointing the finger and trying to say that, anybody on the Browns defense was tapping out. I'm not in a position to speak on that, and nor do I think anybody was. But I think it was really impressive that you saw in a really difficult time, you saw a second-year player, and even more so when Za'Darius Smith was inevitably traded to the Detroit Lions. You saw a guy like Maguire who, basically just eyes wide open. All right, well, here's my opportunity within this league. And as a day 3 selection, you may never get a starting opportunity. You certainly will not get 2 chances. So Maguire saw this opportunity and just jumped up and kind of seized the moment. And consistent play, always sets the edge. He does not miss very many tackles. He really, really found his way in 2024 in a time where it maybe wasn't so easy. And it could have been a lot easier to just kind of lose focus, not stick with it, all of that stuff. But Isiah McGuire did the absolute opposite of all of that and turned out to be, a fantastic year for him. And the Browns, I don't want to say necessarily rewarded him, but the Browns could have at any point, done more in that defensive end room. They did bring in Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. There were thoughts that maybe they were interested in possibly taking Abdul Carter at the top of the draft, but they didn't. And you have to think that is because there's probably a good amount of faith right now within that Cleveland Browns organization and certainly within that Cleveland Browns locker room that they believe that, maybe there is another step up coming in Isiah McGuire's game. And certainly they're hoping it's going to be from a pass rush standpoint. and he's certainly capable of it. He's got the talent. The only thing is he's just not an overall top shelf athlete that you see from a lot of these guys at the edge position. He's not does not have the athleticism of Myles Garrett. He does not have the athleticism of Micah Parsons. And it's certainly one of the things that probably held him back during the 2023 draft. He had good production at Missouri. He put on the tape against Georgia his final year at Missouri. And, when you watch games like that and dominate programs like Georgia, and you're watching them go against, another school, like you want to say, well, where is the guy on Missouri that could possibly look like he could play for Georgia? And in that film, there was one guy and one guy only, and that guy obviously was Isiah McGuire. So an absolutely colossal opportunity here for Isiah McGuire. And, certainly Agbo is here, and certainly Joe Tryon-Shoyinka and Alex Wright. But for now, McGuire holds that inside position. And part of it is because he is so smart and stout against the run. But how much he can keep of it and whether or not he can expand that role certainly is going to come down to how he succeeds as a pass rusher. Also taken by the Browns in the 2023 NFL draft in the 4th round was now left tackle, at the time right tackle, Dawand Jones out of Ohio State University. Now, we've certainly mentioned a boatload that the Browns right now, at the end of the 2025 season, their top 4 offensive linemen, Joe Bitonio, Ethan Posick, Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin, are no longer under contract. So certainly the Browns could be looking at the end of the season to possibly replace 4 out of 5 starters. Now, Dawand Jones, it is extremely important that Dawand Jones can nail down, I'll just say, a role for the Browns beyond 2025. Now, I think a lot of people want to say, oh, well, he can go back to the right. That's where he's comfortable with. Dawand Jones's issues, and I don't think it's much he can control, is, how much of a effective run blocker he can be. And it's not easy because Dwan is just an absolutely large human. I mean, if he gets into space and it's he and a guy one-on-one, I mean, he's going to absolutely absorb the living daylights out of him. But if it's one where Dwan has got to, basically cut down and chase a would-be guy for him to block, it's just not a very advantageous situation for a man who's 6'9" and change. And I'm not sure Dwan's weight now, but probably anywhere between 360 and 370. And kudos to him for putting in a phenomenal effort. Weight's always been an issue for him, but he's, found a way to keep it much more in control this year. And that's, through diet, through having somebody help him with his diet. And look, a lot of it also comes down to, just food in general. We were all young, right? It was a lot easier to go to a drive-through window than it was to go home and make some chicken. It's just simple, but Dwan, to his credit, has found a way to work on all of that. Now, whether or not he's ultimately a left tackle or ultimately a right tackle, certainly the Browns would love for him to be the left tackle. And again, it's not going to be based on his run blocking. And, Dwan was a former basketball player, so the footwork is pretty good. So it could be either spot. Now, certainly the Browns' future plans somewhere along the line could involve investing extremely highly in a left tackle. Dwan could prevent that for at least one offseason, or maybe he could prevent that for a few seasons. And, health would be huge because, when Dwan has played, for the most part, he's been a pretty solid performer. So I think, he could at worst end up being the right tackle. But I think if you're going to get what we think the best of Dawand Jones is, he can be a left tackle in this league. Not top 5, not top 10, maybe top half. Let's be honest, for 24 and 23, the Cleveland Browns maybe had what? A bottom 10, bottom 5 left tackle in Cedric Wills. So it's not like you need Dawand Jones to just go out there and be this absolute, second coming of Joe Thomas which certainly would be unfair to ask anyway. But, Dwan has got the athleticism. He's got the size. He's got the reach. He's got the length. I mean, he's got the mountain factor. There are just so many things going for Dawand Jones. He is certainly the guy to, definitely be pulling for here in the 2025 season and hopefully make it a little easier, for the Cleveland Browns who don't want to have to be in a position at the end of this season where they're going to do a complete and utter tear down and rebuild of their offensive line. Now, like I said, Andrew Berry's drafts get some criticism, and I wouldn't say that they are. It's the ability to avoid any criticism. I don't, but I do believe, I don't think people are essentially being fair. I think people are looking at some of these selections and saying, well, that was the top pick. The top pick should be good. Well, not when the top pick is pick 74. But if you're looking at this 2023 draft now, and you say, and you take out of the equation of first round pick, second round pick, but if you said, the top three selections, well, three of the four top selections, there was another third round selection. Siaki Ika, where you at? Because he can't even make a 90-man roster right now. But if you said, 3 years after a draft, that the top three picks in that draft were a wide receiver who was slated to start, a left tackle who was slated to start, and a defensive end who, again, is slated to start. That wouldn't be a terrible draft. But I think so many people sometimes are so quick to criticize. And I think they're so quick to criticize the drafts because of what was given up to bring in Deshaun Watson. You can't have it both ways. And again, if Deshaun Watson was now going into his fourth year with the Cleveland Browns, two of them had been playoff seasons, nobody would be complaining about the drafts. They wouldn't be complaining about the drafts. They would be thrilled that after all this time, they finally felt they had their franchise quarterback. So to critique Berry's drafts over the last few years, it's just not necessarily fair. Because if you're not getting, top 32, top 40, top 45, top 50, top 64, when you're starting the draft in the 70s, it's not that easy, man. It's just not. But here you are now with all of them going into the third year, and you could have Cedric Tillman, Isiah McGuire, and Dawand Jones from the 2023 draft class, all drafted picks 74 or lower, now starting. Throw into that mix undrafted free agent Ronnie Hickman, who's going to have to battle, but certainly could have the opportunity to be the Cleveland Browns starting free safety in 2025. So you look at that, and then you say, well, that 2023 draft class, 4 starters. That's a lot better than most draft classes do. So this is always the thing, with the draft classes, you cannot be quick to judge. I mean, if the guy's burned out and he's out of the league already, like Ika, all right, that's fine. But you got to have some patience and, kind of go back and revisit 1 year after, 2 years after, 3 years after, and kind of get a better idea where the class is at. So that 2023 class, the Browns need some of these guys to start paying higher dividends. And it's certainly going to be the opportunity, certainly, for Tillman, for Maguire, for Dwan, and of course, for Ronnie Hickman on the back end of the Cleveland secondary. As always, we appreciate everybody who comes on out to the OBR every single day, whether it's to read the written content from our incredible group of writers, or it's joining us every night at 6 p.m. on the OBR streaming network, beginning with Browns 3D, hosted by myself. Like I said, you'll have Jacob Roche, you'll have Sam Panix, and they will give you even more as they go into the hood and give a little more deeper look on Now Browns third year defensive end, Isiah McGuire. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR over on Twitch. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D and the OBR streaming network. And we'll talk to y'all tomorrow.